Welcome to the Market Frontlines. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk. American Atomics has stepped into the center of one of the most explosive pivots in modern energy. This company isn't about headlines, it's about building the backbone for a nuclear future that the U.S. says it needs right now. Supply chains are stretched thin. We see it more and more. Governments are scrambling to secure domestic long-term fuel, and the world is finally acknowledging that nuclear is not optional anymore. Now, at the forefront of that shift is Conor Lynch, the founder of American Atomics. Conor, this space is moving fast, and your company seems to just be moving even faster, so I'm happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Lyndsay, for having me again.
Let's get right into this. Now, Conor, with the Strait of Hormuz already showing signs of disruption, how has that moment instantly elevated nuclear to a top priority for energy outside of the U.S., that energy security across, Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan?
Energy is the backbone of the world economy. Without energy, you can't do anything. And when you have a major energy disruption like you have now in the Strait of Hormuz, that energy dynamic gets very real. The economic reality of energy powering all of our factories, all of our compute becomes very real very, very quickly. You have 20% of the world's oil, a significant portion of the world's LNG comes out of the Gulf. And when that gets cut off, the countries that are the major consumers of this, they're starting to look for other sources of energy, ways to not be so reliant on fossil fuels. So Japan, they have something like 41 reactors in the total fleet. 15 of them are active. The rest are still inactive. They've been planning to bring those back online after Fukushima, and that is going to accelerate. The Germans, they're likely to start building reactors again. The French are going to start building more reactors. The Chinese already have something like 38 different reactors under construction right now, like really under construction right now. That number is going to go up because all of these countries realize if a handful of drones and missiles in a narrow strait, thousands of miles away can shut off their economies, that is not a viable solution. So nuclear becomes the pathway. We anticipate that this is going to drive much quicker adoption of nuclear energy and, in turn, uranium demand for the years and decades to come.
Well, that's the thing is you watch the news right now. This isn't just headlines. I mean, this forces governments to really actually just rethink how fragile that entire energy system really is. Now, if you look at that level of risk right now, how does that level of geopolitical risk accelerate the urgency for countries to really actually secure long-term nuclear fuel instead of relying on global energy trade routes?
I'll give you an example of how fragile this is. Something like 20% of the world's LNG comes from the South Pars field, specifically from the Qataris. The Qataris have 17 of these refrigerated compressors that you need to take the gas form of natural gas and convert it into the liquid form that you can actually ship. If those machines don't exist, that LNG doesn't exist. It's 20% of the world's supply. So in one of the missile exchanges, the Iranians took out 2 of the compressors. They could fairly easily take out the other 15. If the other 15 are taken out, 20% of the world's LNG is just gone. And the lead time for those machines is 5 years. So we would basically be in a global energy depression for 5 years while those machines were built to replace that LNG supply.
Oh my gosh. And that's the thing is we're not in a depression quite yet, but you can feel that choke point happening so much right now. And it's not just in oil and gas either. We see it in agriculture. We see it, of course, at the fuel pumps. We see it in, manufacturing, in supply. We see it across the world. So, I mean, you just said it right there. You take out 2. That's 2.
Yep.
That's dangerous. And you feel it already.
It's very dangerous. And what you have now are you have countries, you have Fortune 500 companies that are realizing that supply chain disruption is not a hypothetical. They've seen COVID. They've seen what's happening now with Hormuz. They've seen trade wars. And they're understanding that they need to diversify supply of everything. And nowhere is that more important than energy. And nothing is a better platform for diversification in energy than nuclear is.
Well, that urgency, you can see it's now quickly turned from just a question of supply. It's not just actually a question of supply. It's not just about strategy. It's, when it's going to happen, and we need it to happen now. So the U.S. Department of Energy is targeting a jump from roughly 2 million pounds to 20 million pounds of domestic uranium production per year by 2033, I think I read. So, Connor, how realistic is that scale up given where the industry stands right now?
So I just attended the most recent town hall meeting of the Department of Energy DPA Consortium for the fuel cycle. So all of the industry leaders from across the entire fuel cycle, from the explorers and miners all the way through to the utilities that actually produce energy consuming uranium, were there, and they're participants. And the target, again, it's sort of 20 million pounds per year of production in the United States versus the 2 million that are happening now. The target date is 2033. Industry believes we can hit that if the right incentives and support are there. And so right now, this administration and this Department of Energy under Chris Wright are eager to provide that support. And so I think it'll be forthcoming. I think that's something that we'll probably see in the headlines in the coming weeks and months. This is work that the committee is doing diligently right now, and we think it'll start paying dividends in terms of actual government support for new production in the near term.
Well, those targets, I mean, Connor, they sound ambitious on paper, but they also expose just how far behind the U.S. really is on this. I mean, what does that production gap signal about the opportunity for new entrants like American Atomics to step into and become part of the U.S. domestic supply solution?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic because America consumes 32 million, 34 million pounds of uranium a year, something in that ballpark. So even if they hit that 2033 target, we're still in a massive domestic supply deficit. At the same time, globally, we're in a supply deficit. So we need to make up that gap, which is huge, from supply in the United States. And so that requires new deposits to be brought online. That requires a lot more exploration. That requires that the production incentive dynamic, the market signals for price in the United States be robust enough that it justifies doing this exploration work, which, as you know, mineral exploration of any kind is expensive, and it's hard work. So the incentive needs to be there, and we think it will be. We think it's going to be robust in the United States, and with some of the assets we have, we think we can be a big part of that supply future.
So I have a question for you then, Connor, because, it sounds like things are really starting to come back home, we'll say. And all of those supplies, what we have been talking about, they're coming home now. So we're not going to have to rely so much on those outsourcing anymore. How do you think, or do you think, the trade agreements will continue or be altered going forward now that those supplies are being brought back this side of the border?
Yeah, so I think it won't have a big effect for Canadian suppliers. That's generally viewed as allied source. But if you have material coming from Kazakhstan or coming from Russia, I think it's extremely unlikely that, right now there are bans on Russian sourced uranium, but there have been waivers that have been given because right now it's needed. You get to a point where 2/3 of domestic uranium consumption in the United States comes from America. Is there still going to be uranium imported from Russia at that point? I think far less likely. Uh, Far less likely. So it changes the global dynamic for that. It's one of the pieces that the Russians have used as leverage. The fact that America needs its uranium. It's the same in the same way the Chinese use rare earths. The Chinese know that America needs Chinese rare earths. They are the sole refiner of most of them, and so it's a leverage point. So it's a game of leverage geopolitically, and so the Americans are playing to get some of that leverage back that they've given up over the years.
Well, there's a massive gap that we keep talking about here. And when there is that kind of gap, the market really starts looking for who can actually deliver and not just actually talk about it. So I'm going to flip this over here. I mean, you've now signed a definitive agreement on the Big Indian exploration project. Connor, what makes this the number one uranium exploration target in the U.S. right now?
It's exciting because of structurally what it is. So to give you the background on, I have to give a brief history lesson on uranium in the United States. Very brief, I promise. The Prior to 1952, there was no domestic uranium production in the U.S. the stuff that went into the Manhattan program, the weapons program prior to that date, all comes from overseas, Belgian Congo, places like that. In 52, a guy named Charlie Steen goes out to Lisbon Valley in Utah, and he sinks some drill holes into the rock there. His drill rig breaks down. He assumes he's found nothing. He loads the core into the back of his pickup truck, drives into town. A kid with a Geiger counter runs his Geiger counter over the back of his truck, and it lights up. And it turns out he hasn't found nothing. He's found the Lisbon Valley deposit, which produces 80 million pounds of uranium at the highest grades in hard rock in American history between 52 and the 80s. And the reason that history lesson is important is because Big Indian is a salt anticline. So picture a big salt dome 300 million years ago. Water that contained uranium came through the base of it millions and millions of years ago. The uranium gets deposited and salt dome collapses. Now, typically, when you have one of these things, you get deposition all across the anticline. You wouldn't get it on just the west side, but not the east side. But in terms of production, that's what happened here. The historical production is all from the west side. So geologists have long assumed that there would be a mirror deposit somewhere on the east side, but it had not been found. Part of the reason is that the strata where you'd expect to find uranium on the east side is deeper. It's like 700 meters instead of 100 meters. Now, in 2014, an oil and gas company had a block on that eastern side, and they drilled down to 6,000 feet. So well through the depth where you'd expect to find uranium. They didn't pull core, but they had gamma log readings all down those holes. Gamma logs are measures of radiation. And so what this means is we've got a claim block that we've got this definitive agreement on to earn into 80%. Where it's in the exact place where you expect to find a mirror deposit to 80 million pounds of uranium on the western side. And at the exact depth where you'd expect to find that deposit, you have really anomalous radiation up to 10 to 12 times background. So more than likely, the drilling company that had it before found this mirror deposit, this what we hope and anticipate is upwards of 80 million pounds of uranium. They just didn't know it. And so they relinquished the claims, and now we have an earn-in for 80% of them, largely for drilling commitments. So the idea is we get into drilling that this year, and we'll prove a few things. We'll prove that we're right, that the gamma logs and those radiation signals mean uranium. We'll know grade and thickness and see if it looks like it did on the western flank. And when we get through our top 5 targets across that sector, which run the entire north-south channel along the eastern flank of the valley, we'll know the extent of it. So we'll have a pretty good sense of if we found something that's big enough to make a dent in America's larger domestic uranium needs.
I mean, that's huge news right now. And if you find what you say you're going to find there and what you're thinking it could be there, how significant could that Big Indian project become in actually contributing to closing that domestic supply gap the U.S. is now urgently trying to solve?
Yeah, the biggest undeveloped uranium deposit in the U.S. is Coles Hill in Virginia. It's about 120 million pounds. It can't be produced because there's a moratorium in Virginia on uranium mining. If this came in at 80 million pounds, it would probably be the second or third largest undeveloped deposit in the U.S. So we would be in a position to build another conventional hard rock mill in the United States. Right now, there's only one, Energy Fuels White Mesa facility in Blanding in Utah. So we would be the second, and it'd be a very significant project. It'd be a big part of America's uranium industry.
Well, I mean, we are at a time. However, I mean, Conor, this has been so clear. This has been so sharp, and it's really brought some real light and real life examples into a topic that's, so many people are watching so closely right now. So thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
For anyone watching who wants to understand where the next wave of energy security and uranium supply is being built, this is the story you're going to want to keep on your radar. American Atomics trades on the CSE under the symbol NUKE, N-U-K-E, and on the Frankfurt under Q3B. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk with Abaton Media. This is the Market Frontlines. And remember, in this market, the future doesn't wait for anyone. So stay ahead by staying tuned right here. We'll see you next time.